りおしまい。
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Get the Mic, the only show where your host on the left, Owl,
and your host on the right, Brock,
dissect fiction for its mythological significance. On this episode, we're talking about Dragon Ball as usual, in particular Dragon Ball episode 92, which is called Goku Enters the Ring, or At Long Last, Enter Son Goku. Before we get started, please give us a like if you like what you hear. Subscribe to us. We upload videos on Mondays and Thursdays on YouTube, Tuesdays and Fridays on Rumble. Give us a subscribe over there. We'd appreciate any rumbles as well. And whether you agree or disagree, we'd love to hear what you have to say in the comments, so please leave us a comment. And without further ado, let's go ahead and get started with episode 92. So the first thing we see is that Goku is watched by the gang. He gorges himself and discusses the fame of his upcoming challenger, Pomput. Bulma appears to be smitten by this fighter, and Launch says that she hates his type. That's blonde Launch, by the way.
Right.
Back at Pomput's hotel, his manager fends off a horde of thirsty women and tries to warn Pomput of Goku's strength. Pomput ignores this, telling him to focus on the celebration plans, his victory party afterwards. That's kind of the first little bit we see here. Our first exposure to Pomput really at all, besides passing.
There are a few things I like about this section. The first being that Bulma seems to be just totally smitten with the idea of Pomput, talking about how he's dreamy and he seems so cool. They talk about how he's a movie star and now he's a world-class fighter. I love the rip-off Star Wars poster that they have with him where he's awkwardly holding what appears to be a lightsaber. And then whenever she says that, Launch comes back at her and says, I hate his type, right?
Yes.
And like none of them know his name, so Bulma has to tell them about him. They're
Pamputo.
like, is it Pamper? It's Pumpkin.
Is it Pamphlet?
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that goes to show too, Launch is what Launch is, right? She hates this type because she's matured past the idea of being infatuated with it. She can see through Pomput already.
Right, and what Pomput is, I'm going to say just right from the beginning of this episode, it's kind of obvious that he's being the thing that Goku needs to confront here in this next fight that he has. Everything about him is in his name, right? And Bulma knows what his name is and has to tell everyone his name. And so this is a reflection of what Goku's been going through in this past arc when he had to go out into the world and make a name for himself, right? So Pompet is sort of the top of that hierarchy. He's the most famous. He's the most well renowned and well known. He's beloved in that sense. And so Bulma, sort of being this archetypal feminine, immature feminine figure, idolizes him, right? And then, of course, the more mature Launch,
Adores him more, but yeah.
yeah, or yeah, idolizes, I guess is not the right word, but then the more mature Launch says, "Oh, he's all name, right?" And she recognizes that he would be a lot of bluster because of how much he puts stock in his own name because he's a movie star and stuff like that. And so she says, "Oh, I hate his type." Um, Another thing I want to point out is just the key animator on this episode did my girl a great service. I love Launch in this episode. I'm glad she doesn't look derpy like we had in the last few episodes where Yamcha especially. Ugh. They really did my boy dirty.
Frog Yamcha, yeah.
He really looks
Cross-eyed,
awkward.
cross-eyed, awkward
Wide,
Yamcha.
cross-eyed, awkward Yamcha. Now we're getting a bit back to some of the better animation in Dragon Ball.
And there's a couple more things then I think we should get to. The first thing is that Goku is gorging himself in the beginning, and Pompet's like training in the beginning, right? So we kind of see the contrast there. It has to do with that idea. I don't know if I've said it on the show yet, but that victorious warriors win first and then go to war, while defeated warriors go to war first and then seek to win. Right? Pomput is already thinking about that victory, but he's already in this, right? And he's seeking to win. Where Goku is, he doesn't even.
He's not thinking about the fight.
He's not thinking about the fight. Doesn't really hold too much stock in Pomput because Goku has experienced quite the bluster now and again from Murasaki, let's say, was a good example of it. That he's already kind of surpassed that idea to put too much stock in a name.
Right, Murasaki was sort of that first seed of that idea, right? Where there was there's a difference between Murasaki and Tao Pai Pai, right? Where one calls himself the best assassin and one is the best assassin. And Goku's already confronted both of those things, right? And so that dichotomy, Goku's already worked out. So what Goku's doing, as he always does, and as we learned at the end of Korin Tower, he's doing what he always does before a fight, which is he's eating well, moving well, and resting well, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so everyone is like, they're embarrassed by how much Goku's feeding himself, and he just eats even more whenever they call him out for it. And he says, "Well, maybe I should have him make me some rice balls so I don't get hungry," And that's sort of that idea that, um, that's all because Goku's on the right path. That's all he really needs is to just keep nourishing himself to go along that path. He doesn't need to change anything about himself for this fight.
And there's nothing about Pomput that can really get in his way, except for what we're gonna see.
Right.
And so the whole dynamic with him and his manager here, how the girls are all over Pomput, right? That goes back to that idea of what we were talking about with Bulma. It's this
Right.
idea of someone who superseded the hierarchy such that his name itself is recognized to be above that, right? And so the hypergamous nature of women selecting from the top of the hierarchy, this is like he who's supposed to represent that. It's almost a picture of that, let's say.
And we're set up before this that this isn't good for Bulma because she hated this about Yamcha. Whenever
Yes.
the girls would gather and fawn over Yamcha's name, she did not like that and actually held it against Yamcha. We know that that doesn't work for her. She doesn't want to be with somebody ultimately who's going to have all of that attention and be at ultimately at the top of that hierarchy because she knows that she's not really at the top of her own hierarchy.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so that's something that we already know is going to be set up to be brought down later in this episode.
Right. And so I think we can go ahead and proceed. So back at the restaurant, Roshi creeps on a trio of girls and tries to use Goku and Krillin as props to gain their admiration. When they direct all their attention to the boys, Roshi decides that he'll test their strength to show his prowess. So they all go over and they're like, "Oh, Goku and Krillin are so cute," and Roshi's like, "Well, I wanted you to pay attention to
It's like,
me, so."
but I'm their trainer.
Right, exactly. And so they head to the training area, and the girls watch as Roshi tests Goku's strength. Outside the building, Pomput's manager watches as well, realizing that Pomput will not be able to match Goku's strength. Goku puts on a pretty impressive display whenever he's just sparring here.
Right. He surprises even Roshi with how strong he's become. A couple of things about this whole situation with the three girls. So Roshi, we saw a situation similar to this an episode or two ago, where there's this uh, misalignment where Goku has to pee after the other fighters are getting that attention from the girls, and so Roshi wants to reveal himself for how he is whenever he's not getting the attention that he thinks that his prowess, let's say, deserves. And so he sets up a scenario where he can reveal the fact that actually he's really Jackie Chun, right? But he can't be Jackie Chun in this moment. And so he wants to reap the rewards and be as lecherous as he is explicitly. And so it really
Right,
doesn't
and
work for
it's
him.
well, and I think what you're getting at is something important because when he is Jackie Chun, he's integrated and kind of free at the same time because he's free to do whatever. He's not Roshi, he's not bound by Turtle, let's say.
Right.
And so here, right, it's an issue of like of what you were saying that he can't be Jackie Chun right now, but he still wants to get the take autographs and things like that, like he was doing in the last couple episodes.
And as a gag, right, there's two attractive girls and one girl who's clearly drawn not to be attractive, and that's the only girl who will give him the attention.
Yeah, and she's
And
like, "Let's
so
go, old man."
and so of course he's garnering the attention of the girl that he doesn't want to get attention from because it sort of reflects Roshi instead of Jackie Chun. Whereas if he was Jackie Chun, he actually would be getting the attention from all of the girls, right?
Right, exactly, exactly. And the manager seeing this, the only thing I want to mention there is that the manager is kind of the apparatus by which Pomput has become famous to begin with.
He understands the game, right? He
Right.
knows that Pompa is a name and that he doesn't actually have that much substance behind the name. And so he tries to tell him in the last part where he says, "Hey, so I wanted to tell you something I found out about Goku." And Pompa tells him something along the lines of, "It doesn't matter what you have to tell me. Just prepare my victory." He's so egotistical that it to him the fact that he's able to be at the top of a hierarchy means that he is at the top of hierarchies.
Of all, yeah,
And so
exactly.
so the manager, of course, this is his ticket to money, to success. Is being able to keep him as an image at the top of the hierarchy. And he says, "Well, how am I going to be able to do that? Because Goku actually walks the walk, right?"
Mhm.
And so he starts devising a plan here as he's watching. He's like, he's actually going to beat him. And he already suspected, and he says specifically, "I heard rumors that this is the kid that single handedly beat up the Red Ribbon Army."
Defeated the Red Ribbon Army. Didn't believe it, but now
Now
he
he sees him and
sees it, yeah.
he's like, "Oh, he's real."
Right, and that's something that's happened in the world that kind of gives precedence, which I like in the sub because I don't think it's said in the dub. I think he's just like, "Oh, geez, Pomput is gonna get beat up."
The sub is way better, pretty much for this whole arc, but you can see it come through in this episode in several spots.
There's one thing that we'll get to that I like the dub better, but we'll get to that
Right.
in a couple, maybe next episode actually. So, yeah, this whole scene happens and it ends up, I guess, with Goku being dissatisfied with the training. I think
Yeah,
that's how it ends, right?
well, what happens is that whenever the uglier girl gives attention to Roshi, it distracts him because he's taken aback. He wants the attention from the other two girls, and when she looks at him,
He's
he
like,
turns his
ah,
face away in disgust. He's like, "Ugh." And when he does that, Goku punches him in the face, and he says, "Okay, enough, enough. I'm going to test Krillin."
yeah. And then
And Goku
Goku's like,
Goku says, "Well, I'm going to go for a jog." And Roshi tells him, "Don't go too far because your match is soon."
that's what it is, yeah. And so Goku goes for that jog. And Launch stops off to buy the two some ice cream. Pomput's manager then arrives in a car offering Goku a ride to the match, which has moved miraculously to another location. He offers to give Goku a ride so that he won't miss that match, and Goku leaves with him. Launch sees as he rides away and steals a motorcycle to pursue the car. She eventually corners it and subdues the manager's cronies, telling Goku that he has been tricked. Goku races back toward the arena to try to make it before the match begins. Meanwhile, Launch is left to deal with the simpering manager.
He immediately, whenever he's confronted by Launch, begins to apologize and whimper on the ground.
And it is to say, it's almost the same. Like he has this whole mafioso appearance as well. It's almost an analog or a mirror of Pompa because there's not much substance to him either. It's not like he has red ribbon soldiers or something like that that have guns or wield malice in any kind of way.
He
Like,
really is just a pathetic version of Red, right?
yeah, exactly.
And there's a few things also about this that I think are telling. One is that Launch, whenever she catches up to the car, she's holding the ice cream. I love the chase scene when she's zooming through traffic with an ice cream cone held up, and she's still hanging onto that ice cream cone all the way to the end of the chase.
Mm-hmm.
And when she first catches up, she says, "Goku, Goku,
Your
I got
ice
you ice
cream.
cream."
Yeah, exactly.
And so I guess it makes sense because in her mind, she's like, "Why would Goku be distracted from the fight?"
And from ice cream.
And so she's like, "To get him back on the path, I have ice cream for you.
Yes,
I know that you
exactly.
want nourishment. I have the nourishment. It's right here.
I am Launch. I do provide nourishment. Here is nourishment.
I was
Yeah.
doing something nice."
Mhm.
She says explicitly, "I was doing something nice for once." Um, it's pretty funny. And then of course she throws the ice cream cone in one of the cronies' face, and then tells Goku that was a load of crap.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so it's to show the deceptive nature by which a spirit is can be possessed if they're not substantial. The only method by which Pompet can still exist is through deception.
And it kind of begs the question: how did Pompa win these other matches? Did they
We don't
throw
know.
it
Yeah, we
for
don't know if he
money?
cheated or not.
It becomes sort of a question as to what the circumstances were around him being at the supposed top of a hierarchy to begin with. And so the fact that there's a doubt before the manager sees Goku's strength kind of implies that there is some deception happening. And so this is kind of a continuation of that. Of course, the jig is up as soon as he's confronted by Launch, and we're left with a shot of Launch cracking her knuckles as she walks up to him.
And it's great because Launch is the one that has to save Goku here. She is Mother Nature herself, redirecting or guiding the path of the heroic when it's astray or when it's deceived. And so she helps Goku here out of this, which surely would have made him lose the match.
Similarly, a couple of episodes ago, it was Launch who turned into Blonde Launch whenever the Dodon Ray became part of the equation, so that she could give the proper sort of incentive towards Krillin to be able to fight his own match. Right?
And she says what like
There will be hell to pay if you don't win
yeah,
this one.
yeah, yeah,
Right? And
yeah.
so, and of course, in that match, it makes sense because it can't be just the nurturing voice of people saying, "Hey, you're good enough." Whenever malice becomes part of the equation, then it needs to be
There
okay.
needs to be a
This is the punishment for losing this is actually worse than just you're not going to get the
and there are
attention
boundaries.
you want.
There's a very distinct boundaries of victory and defeat, right? Yeah.
And so she's stuck around, and now and it's a very malicious thing that the manager is doing here and taking Goku away from the fight. And so then she intervenes again and says, "Okay, no, 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 we're not going to play that game."
And so she cracks her knuckles, and then we go back to the arena. So in the arena, Pomput enters the ring with his trademark showmanship coming in from the roof of the, I guess, complex.
Yeah.
And it seems as though Goku will not arrive in time to participate in the match, as the announcer begins to say that according to the rules, Goku is disqualified. But at the last moment, Goku arrives, and Pomput, after they square off to each other, and Goku bows. Want to
Yes.
mention that Goku bows, even though Goku's already, he could have probably already puzzled out that this is not an admirable spirit, and there's nothing admirable about the way Pomput is. Um, And so he bows to him, and Pomput throws a punch right at Goku before the fight, trying to cause Goku to flinch, but Goku just stands there and looks at him, and he says it didn't seem like a very strong punch.
He says, "Oh, well, you must be tough if you didn't flinch." And Goku's like, "Well, it didn't seem like a real punch.
Yeah,
Like, why would I flinch?"
and that's the thing is like it didn't seem like a real punch. Like Pomput's not a real fighter, let's say.
Right. And also, the intention of the punch was not to harm Goku, and Goku can see.
The intentions, yeah, already he's already mapping Pomput out as the match hasn't even started yet. And so Pomput then launches into a display of attacks to show his strength, shadow boxing, and then breaking a part of the arena with his elbow. Goku, however, is unimpressed, and when the fight begins, Goku easily catches Pomput's punch and knocks him unconscious. After the fight, Jackie Chan explains to Goku and Krillin that their strength has reached such heights that even a world-class fighter like Pomput seems weak. That's important. So we'll get to that in a minute.
Yes.
Let's first get the first part. So the showmanship already characterizes Pomput more that and solidifies what he's supposed to be. The whole feign of a punch we already kind of talked about
Well,
there.
one thing about the feign of a punch also is when Goku says that it didn't seem like a real punch, Pompous says, "You must not know who I am then." Right? So
And it's not
playing back
like
into that name.
yeah. It's not like you must not be afraid of death then. Because that's something like Tao would say. Tao
Right.
wouldn't be like, "Do you know who I am?" He would just do it.
He would just kill him.
Yeah, exactly. And so yeah, and that's a good indicator as well. And then the little like barrage of attacks that he does and he breaks the arena. We've already seen the arena broken by people flying into it. It's not as impressive as he would think.
Though to him it's an impressive thing because what he's saying by breaking part of the arena is that who he is transcends this hierarchy. He thinks that he's above this hierarchy, right? As he's a movie star, as he's the number one in the world and other things, he says, this is, as I've said in other fights, he thinks that this is a formality. And he's already thinking about his celebration. So it's the means to an end. Whereas for Goku, this isn't a means to an end. He wants to encounter chaos here and learn what he can from it. And so the fact that Pompet thinks that he's above this hierarchy obviously would not impress Goku.
And he even starts off the scene, right, coming above on the complex, above the
Exactly,
hierarchy,
yeah.
let's say, yeah. And so yeah, that's definitely solidified that he thinks that. And by him destroying though, like the
Oh,
demon
another
part of
thing
it,
too about it, I like that Roshi and Krillin say, "Oh, it's easier to watch the match now," because he reveals himself for what he is when he
mhm.
does it. So he becomes transparent by doing it.
And by doing so, he kind of calls attention to everyone's name and allows everyone to, or allows Krillin and Roshi to actually see the fights better, right? He calls attention to that idea that the insubstantial spirit is one that is self-revealing, and this happens too in a different way, I would say, with fans who are like posing to be fans of things. Anita Sarkeesian, for example, right? Like, I'm such a gamer, and then she's like, I don't like games,
Right.
and so she outed herself, right? Let's say, and that'll happen as well. And so Pomput really outs himself here by doing what he was doing, by shadow boxing and breaking the ring.
Well, what's funny about when he breaks the ring, that's when we cut to Bulma swooning over him, and Oolong calls her out and says, "Whose side are you supposed to be on anyway?"
And she says
She
both.
says, "Isn't it obvious?" And then she looks conflicted, and then she says both. So it shows an immaturity in Bulma's spirit still that she can't really differentiate the difference.
But it is a point where Oolong has something substantial to add to Bulma that she's ignoring.
It's a criticism that she won't incorporate, she won't integrate, and that's the existence of Oolong in the show, right? He's pointing out to her that the way that she's viewing this fight is not from the right perspective.
Right, and she is idolizing that which does not deserve not idolizing. She's admiring. I use the same thing. She's admiring that which doesn't deserve adoration.
The name of the title is nothing compared to what it actually represents. And so she's missing the forest for the trees, so to speak, right? She doesn't understand that just having the status, just having the title of world's best does not mean the same thing as actually encountering that chaos and integrating
Which
everything that
brings us
it
into our
brings.
last part here with
Yeah.
Roshi and what he tells the boys that their strength has reached such heights that world class fighters seem weak. This is to say that those people who are able to integrate themselves to such a level that they have surpassed and elevated the human spirit, regular people, regular world class people, right, aren't going to seem like they're on that path because Pomput is on a path of, let's say, self gratification, right? He's trying to make money through his manager, things like that, and so that puts him in a category that's like I don't want to say
It's
regular people, but
superficial.
like it's yeah, it's superficial, but it's almost every day. It's almost a mundane thing to strive to
It's
get money.
worldly.
Yeah, yeah. And so spiritually, which is what Krillin and Goku are, they're not as worldly. They're above that. And so that's why Jackie Chun tells them this here, and it also explains why later on we see Hercule, Mr. Satan,
I was gonna say the same
right?
thing, yeah.
And how weak he is comparatively, because again, they're on a different path than regular people. They're embodying and integrating an idea in their spirit that supersedes themselves.
I do really like not only that Hercule is doing the same thing as this guy, almost looks like an older version of
It
Pompet.
is. Have you ever seen them in the same scene? I never have.
True.
They're the same. That's his
Gohan
middle name,
Gohan gets
Pompa. Oh my
with Pompet's daughter.
god. Okay. So, anyways,
uh
anything else that you want to add here?
One small thing, just to sort of back up what we were saying about Launch, there is a little clip here of her turning back into Blue Launch once she's dealt with the manager, which is to show that her job is done, so to speak. And now what she's going to do is return to nourish the hero instead of
And to
being a
support, yeah.
threatening sort of I don't want to say threatening, but there's a difference between the sort of support that the I want to be specific about how I say this, that the nurturing feminine spirit and the judgmental feminine spirit can bring, right? And so it's that judgment has been cast on who it needs to be cast on, and now her role that she's going to play now is to come back and nourish Goku for
Well,
doing what he needs to do, which
um,
is to dispatch with this pretender, so to
it's
speak.
also to say, right, that the goal of that archetypal feminine spirit, like Mother Nature, which sets things right for the hero and sets the hero on the path and helps the hero when possible, that focus is not on vengeance. It's on that.
Correcting.
Yeah, and so once it's been fixed, there's no need to exhibit the malice that Blonde Launch would inflict upon these uh
It's been resolved,
poor
right?
saps. Yeah, because it's been
It
resolved.
seems to happen at the
And
same
there's a higher
time,
calling.
right?
Goku is about to, and as far as Launch knows, she doesn't know about Pomput, whether he's going to be stronger or not, whatever. And so there's a higher calling that Goku needs that encouragement and support from that motherly figure.
And it just so happens that as Goku gets back, then she turns into Blue Launch because Goku's where he's supposed to be again. And so it's almost like back to back. We see him arrive back, cuts back, and then she's Blue Launch again to tell us this was what she's doing, right? She's getting the hero back where he needs to be.
Right, and once it's done, it's over. And so I think that's a good place. I think we covered most of our bases here.
Yeah.
Next time, we're going to see the first match of the semifinals. The first round is over. All of the kind of gimmicky characters are gone. Man Wolf is done. And so we're going to see how the rest of this tournament plays out. But if you liked what you heard, please give us a like, subscribe. We upload Mondays and Thursdays to YouTube, Tuesdays and Fridays to Rumble. Give us a subscribe if you agreed with us or if you disagreed. We'd love to hear what you have to say in the comments. Please leave one. We will respond to it. I'm your host on Left Owl,
I'm your host on the right, Brock.
and we hope you guys have a good night.